and welcome everyone. I always appreciate it when you take time out of your day to come listen to whatever our latest topic is. And I think today's an interesting one. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, then you're a multiple site customer, because centralizing down to one site is far less fun than if you have multiple sites. So we're going to focus on that concept, and there's a couple of things in that area that are both challenging and also highly productive when you master them. So the problem, of course, and you know this because you're an enterprise, is the enterprise kind of grew organically. No one got to sit down and say, oh, I'm going to open up 8 facilities, I'm going to buy the same phone system in every one, I'm going to have this architecture, I'm ready to go. It grew through acquisitions and opening up offices when you had to, and as a result, you probably have a fairly complex infrastructure. And you have employees at multiple locations. You may not have been in control of what kind of facilities they had, what kind of infrastructure pieces they had. So the end result is, you know, it's up and running, but maybe it could be more efficient. So we're certainly not the first kind of solution you looked at centralizing down to. In most cases, customers we've talked to have already centralized their data infrastructure and their groupware infrastructure. This has happened over the last years, and it's proven very successful. They've seen a reduction in costs. They've seen a simplification in training employees and in maintaining equipment. And so now they're out there with an eye to do that in other areas. And one of the logical ones is the telephony area. But the telephony area to actually centralize can be very expensive. So if you need to go out and kind of approach a rip and replace project for all those sites, it's very daunting, and from a budget point of view, it might not be happening right away. Kind of in between those two, though, are your call processing systems. And some of those sort of have to be replaced in the near future because of what's gone on in their older legacy systems. And we just want to make sure you understand that centralizing those does not have to be tied to centralizing your entire telephony infrastructure. So if you look at voice, many customers are extending what they have. The truth is your phone system, in terms of functionality, probably pretty much does what you expect a phone system to do. There are some new features, there's some new connectivity with SIP coming around, but a lot of the reorganizational pieces you're doing are going to be more about infrastructure than functionality. So those kind of projects do tend to kind of be put off a little bit sometimes because the amount of money it takes to do them and the actual increase in productivity or anything they bring might not be that high. It's going to happen, and you certainly want to keep that in mind when you look at replacing anything in your infrastructure. We talk to customers all the time that kind of start down the path of saying, well, for everything in the telephony world and networking world, I'm going to go with this one vendor because they have a package for everything. And that's maybe not the best way to go. If you read the consultants' papers, if you go out to Gartner, for example, they'll say, while the suite of products, that's very appealing, and you think, oh, look how simple it will be, all be one. It actually turns out many of those suites were created by those companies buying multiple products and stitching them together, and they aren't all best of breed, and they aren't all that easy to maintain as if they were really one application. So what we like to say is, as you look at changing anything in your enterprise, look at interoperability to make sure that as you go forward, you aren't going to lock yourself in to anything. And of course, we say that because we're kind of the leader in interoperability. Sometimes I feel, people wonder why we're doing these and talking about these big issues. And a lot of people say, well, you're this new company, haven't been around. That's just not true. We just hide. We have 20 million users, and probably 10% of them, if even that many, would recognize our name. We're back in the server room. We're doing a fantastic job, but there's nothing that puts our name out in front of the users. They don't really know whose call processing, messaging, availability kind of functionality they're using. But we've been at this a long time, since 1982. We've had product on the market since 1985. And you could have installed the product in 1985, recorded your name and greeting as a user, and actually be using that same recorded name and greeting. We were lucky enough to start with open architecture, which means we've been able to take our system and continue to develop it, enhance it, and grow it. We've never had to sunset the product at all. And that makes it very feature-rich and very stable. So we have all the core features you need when you replace a legacy voicemail system, but we're also a leader in the best-of-breed UC applications. And you can actually go out and read that. In the Gartner report, they call us out by name for a number of things, certainly unified messaging being one of the biggest ones. So as we look at building solutions, we're looking at lots of different things. First, we've learned over the years that there's different needs, even for the same type of application within an organization. So what an individual needs versus what a team needs versus what the overall organization at a highest level needs is different. So as we, if you attend these webinars that we do for some of our feature applications, you'll see that we're very good about understanding that and giving the right tools to the right kinds of groups. And that's one of the key elements as we spend our R&D dollars that we look at is where are we going to put this work, what's changing, what's new, where are the challenges, and let's make sure we cover those. As we build those applications, we certainly have to keep in mind that a lot of people who do business with us right now are replacing their older legacy systems. They've got an old voicemail, automated attendant, those type of things. They want to keep their PBX, but they have to replace that. So we need to make sure we continue keeping all of our legacy features in the product and building the extra pieces like an alternate telephone user interface or a different type of telephony integration to make sure that our customers can not only buy our product right now, but use that product as they move forward into upgrading the other pieces of their infrastructure. And a lot of that has to do with not just within the infrastructure, but the cloud, or even the private cloud or the hybrid cloud, where we're not all in one building anymore, but we sure would like to work as if we are. So we spend a lot of time in the infrastructure side on connectivity to make sure you can put our solution in today, perhaps as a standalone voicemail for an Octel replacement. And then in 6 months or a year, if you decide to migrate to Office 365, you simply do a little reprogramming and all that same functionality. There's no retraining for the users, etc. So we really spend a lot of time focusing on that. And what little time we have left after that, we need to be looking to the future. There's lots of things that are already changing. We were the first on the market with unified messaging years ago. We were the first on the market with integrated fax functionality. We're the first on the market with an integrated IVR solution. And we are very good about staying on top of what it is that we need to have in our product to help businesses solve their communications problems. Like I said, we have webinars on all these topics, but today we're actually going to look at something a little different. Today we're going to talk about centralizing your infrastructure. And probably the key element in this is taking a look at what your infrastructure is. If you've got multiple sites, you may very well have multiple phone systems, multiple different manufacturers of phone systems. We face a lot of customers even that have different groupware packages that have, they've done acquisitions. They haven't gotten around to actually flattening everything out from an infrastructure point of view, and they're looking at doing various different kinds of things. So for us, the interoperability is one of our real entries into the market. We don't care what your PBX is. We don't care what your email is. Every application that we have works regardless of what your current infrastructure is, but it also lets you move forward. So if today you have a mixed infrastructure of Avaya, NEC, and older Cisco systems, and some of those have old messaging systems, and you're going to be looking at getting rid of those, you can actually do a centralization product on those today, and next year, when you decide to upgrade all those to an Avaya IP infrastructure, or you look at moving to Link as your telephony infrastructure, or going with any of the vendors, moving forward, you can rest comfortably that we're going to be able to do that. Same today. If you're on Exchange, but you know you might be going to Office 365 or to Google, all of that is just a comfortable environment from us. We're really comfortable with what you have today and with showing you how we can let you move forward. And we can do all this, because of that luck I talked about when we started in the early days. Some very, very smart people founded this company, and they built an architecture that was a traditional data architecture of the time. Not the kind of monolithic telephony infrastructure where you have one app on one server that kind of ties up, to one location. Ours is a true core engine with interoperability pieces to connect to things outside the product and application modules that sit on top. And with that infrastructure comes the flexibility to be the best product for consolidation. And the reason is we're able to do many different things on one single instance of our product. There's a lot of different types of architectures out there. If you're a multiple location, you might have your own private cloud or a hybrid deployment where you're using MPLS circuits, let's say, but it's still your network and you want to deploy and centralize across that. Some elements might already be public or be looking at going into the public cloud. And all of that not only takes the interoperability to connect, but the application has to be aware of all of those types of environments. So as you sit down and you draw that whiteboard picture and say, here's where we are now, here's where we want to get to, that interoperability piece is going to be a major component. So let's take a look at centralization. And along the way, we're going to talk about resiliency. They do tend to go hand in hand. Customers that have 8 locations with 8 voicemail systems and they're going to tie them all into one immediately recognize that, you know, that's kind of a all your eggs in one basket solution. So they want to talk about kind of the high availability side of it as well. And that's great because they both go hand in hand. In terms of our solution, CX, it does what you need to have done for centralization. In terms of the resiliency piece, we have a whole webinar just on the high availability of our architecture. This is a true multi-server, no single component can fail and take you out of business. We do on-site full high availability and redundancy, geo-redundancy. We can have up to 20 sites with active survivable elements. We can have up to 10 sites with complete redundancy, so no single element can affect you when it fails other than some amount of traffic. And we scale today up to 752 ports. This goes up on our next level as well. And we do actually have customers who've rolled 60 locations together, let's say, and you know they're pushing that port limit already. So as you start to centralize, the numbers get bigger. And we're really comfortable with that. That's one of the reasons we spent the time building the redundant architecture and the scalable architecture is just for that customer that needs to tie a lot of things together. And on the integration side, we are the leader in being able to connect to all of your telephones, regardless of what type they are. We don't only do the new SIP integrations like some of our competitors do and require gateways for anything else. We have native integrations for all the phone systems on the market today. And our architecture is such that we can connect to multiple phone systems, multiple types of phone systems, which is something that might be very required, depending on what your infrastructure looks like. If you think about one of our systems, we can connect up to 10 different types of phone systems on a single CX instance. Now, that's not 10 phone systems, that's 10 types. We actually have a customer in the Midwest that has 68 sites tied together, and I can't remember how many different types of phone systems that was, but that's the kind of thing we can do quite easily with our architecture. So multiple integrations are not an issue. The multiple components for reliability, whether it's simply a true centralized infrastructure where all the components are duplicated and you have full high availability, or you want distributed availability where the main core sites, maybe you have 8 or 9 different sites, and you want multiple servers at each one of those so they can not only survive a component failure, but they can survive the network failure between that site and the main location. All of that is perfectly doable with our architecture. And of course, you really can't talk about any of this kind of reliability without talking about VMware. We are not only VMware capable, we are VMware certified. You can go out to the VMware Ready status page at VMware and they'll list us and talk about all the wonderful testing we did. But possibly even more important is we're not just capable of running on VMware, we take advantage of the VMware features. A lot of our competition can run on VMware, but if you look at the little asterisk and read the fine print, they don't really take advantage of things like vMotion and high availability and dynamic resource allocation. We support all those. You can have multiple active servers. You can use VMware or vMotion to move a server as it's taking calls without dropping those calls. We have spent a lot of time and money making sure that we don't just support the environment, we support the functionality of VMware. So if you're a VMware house, we're probably somebody you want to talk to when you look at this kind of infrastructure change. So the way we do this is with multiple components. As I said, we have you certainly can have a CX system on one physical server. We can support up to 144 ports on a single physical server, but it gets a little more interesting when we start deploying multiple servers. There's a couple of different components, a call server and a system server. We'll look at those in a second. And by distributing those across your network, that's how we get the availability, the reliability, the way we can have minimum impact on your network. All of that comes from how we play with those components. So if you look at the architecture, the core control server is called a system server. It has the user database, the message store, the admin interfaces, etc. Have to have at least one of those somewhere to be a CX system. The call server is sort of the workhorse. It connects to the phone system. That's what actually answers the calls, runs the applications, plays all the audio to the caller, and records the new messages. And then those new messages would be moved typically to the data store on the system server. So every CX would be at least one system server and call server. Although, like I said, they can both be installed on one physical server if that's really what you're looking for. But once we have these, now we can start deploying the kind of pieces you need for centralization. With remote sites, there's all sorts of choices to have. Because we have all these call servers, and we can have up to 20 call servers, each one of those remote sites, 1 and 2, we can go out and put 2 call servers in. Because that way, if one of the call servers fails, you still are in business out there. By having a call server out there, if the network fails, you're resilient. The call servers will still run. They'll run all the applications, speech rec, automated attendant, availability, everything, record new messages. Those messages will be cached until the system server is back available. You don't have to have multiples. You could have a single call server out at any site you want. You'll still survive a network failure. You just now have a single component out there that might be subject to failing. So it just has to do with how important each of those sites are. And if you have an IP site, you can simply point that back to one of the call servers at the other site. So with this kind of architecture, we can sit down with you, kind of do the whiteboard discussion and say, so what is at this site? How important, is continuous call services? And here's the components we'd suggest moving. Now, if you were to take one of these sites, let's say remote site 2, later, actually, you started your telephony consolidation, and that became just a gateway now off the main site. You would just take those call servers, ship them back to the main site, plug them into the network that we program up, and basically you won't have ever wasted any components on the system. We support another way of connecting to the phone system, and this is a way that most of our competitors, in a multi-PBX type environment would talk to you about, some sort of gateway. A gateway connects to the phone system using traditional technology for an integration and converts that typically to SIP so that that gateway can now converse with some other component on your network. There's great reasons to have dialogic media gateways. That one site that we talked about with 68 locations, a good part of those are dialogic media gateways. You might have them because you're not allowed to have servers in some functions. People don't want Windows servers. You might have a remote clinic in a healthcare organization where you really don't want to be going out and patching servers on a regular basis. So since this is just a rack, a utility device, it's very easy to put those in. But the choice of using them is yours. The downside with a media gateway is if the network fails, there's no application running on that gateway. It's just a format translator. So if the network fails, that site basically goes ring no answer from a call processing point of view. Where having a call server, it would still answer the call, run all the applications. You're still in business. So the choice between those two would be part of that whiteboard discussion. So if you look at the kind of redundancy pieces we can put in place, here's kind of a consolidated network where we have just about everything out there that you might see. At the main site, we have 2 system servers running in active-passive mode. So one of them's running and it's updating the other one. If one fails, the other one kicks in automatically. So there's no way you lose functionality if a system server fails. We have 2 call servers there. If one fails, you could lose capacity. But because we have so many call servers, we can just put more call servers in. If you don't want to ever be at risk of losing 50% of your capacity, we can put 4 in, and then you'd only lose 25%. So at that main site, that's about as redundant as you can get. At the remote sites, you see there's one with 2 call servers. So with call servers at that one, it'll survive a network failure, and it'll survive a component failure with 2 call servers. Remote sites 2 and 3 just have DMGs, dialogic media gateways. So they won't really do much for a network failure, but once again, they're very low maintenance. Remote Site 4 actually has another system server. So this would be the geo-redundancy site, like Data Center 2 or whatever you would call it. So if the entire main site goes down, let's say somebody comes in with a backhoe and tears out your fiber entrance cable, and it's going to be 3 days before they're back up, you probably have a contingency plan. You probably have a plan that's, moving your telco resources, putting employees on a bus to the data center across town, or some sort of plan. And part of that plan now says activate that system server at Site 4. The administrator connects to it. It takes over. Every call server that it can see is fully up and working, and basically, since it's an exact copy of that server, you didn't have to do anything except start it up or make it active. It can be online for 2 days. You're ready. Everything's fixed. You promote the main site system server back. It takes over, and all the new information, programming information, messages, whatever happened during that outage is now reverse migrated back to the core servers at the main site. Very simple, foolproof, geo-redundancy type of architecture. So the toolkit we have really lets us pretty much handle whatever your site looks like. Up to 752 ports. We don't actually license user, but we're comfortable saying 40,000 users is no problem. If you have more than that, then we need to talk about their usage patterns, what applications you're going to use, etc. 20,000 of those users can be configured for unified messaging, and as we said, 20 call servers and 3 system servers. So pretty much whatever your organization looks like, we're going to be able to sit there and lay the components out to give you whatever level of redundancy and survivability you're looking for. If you look at some of the people that we've done this with, we have a lot of case studies, and you can contact us later and we'll give you more of them if you'd like. But this is kind of a good one, and this is a very interesting one. University of Toronto went to bid 3 or 4 years ago, and they perhaps did one of the most complete RFP processes that I've been involved with. They were very, very thorough. They had a consultant come in. They knew exactly what they wanted. They did all their homework and basically narrowed it down to just a few bidders and went through that whole process. And they had some challenges. They're the largest organization of their type, largest university in Canada. They had 3 distinct campuses. They're all in the Toronto area, but they were all quite separated. 11,000 faculty and staff members, 72,000 students, and they had older Octel systems. They knew they had to get rid of their legacy systems. They didn't just want to replace them in the architecture they were. They wanted to take this opportunity to start the centralization as well. So they had to centralize messaging across 3 campuses, and at the same time, these were smart people. They wanted to minimize the training, but they also wanted to look at what can we add for our users. This is the time to say, what's out there that we haven't been able to deploy in the older systems that might be useful, both the caller experience and the unified messaging. And their unified messaging environment was going to undergo a change, and they knew that, so they needed that flexibility. So what we were able to do is go in and talk to them in terms of, in the initial phase, we're going to go ahead and consolidate your environment. We're going to be able to take multiple elements, put them out at each of the campuses, give you a fully integrated system. We have the interface, the one that emulates the older system, the older Octel interface that you have, so training will be minimized. We have the most flexible unified messaging out there. And we also spent some time talking about moving forward what else you could run on the product that maybe they didn't want to consider in this initial implementation, but they wanted to know about. So things like a speech recognition automated attendant, context-aware routing, where we can route the calls to various users depending on their calendar and their physical location, things along those lines. So we had a very good experience in terms of letting them understand the capabilities of the product. This is not only typical, but something you need to consider. If you're looking at consolidation, and you may well be looking at consolidation along with legacy system replacement, kind of the starting point for most customers is, I just want to get through this project. I just want to get rid of those systems that are out of maintenance, get them back on maintenance, consolidate for an easier infrastructure. I'm not interested right now in any of the advanced functionality. That's almost every opening conversation that we have. The problem with that is this system you're picking now is the one where you want to have the discussions eventually on the advanced applications. There's no doubt that the new UC functions coming down the road are going to be of interest to everyone, and in the lifetime of any system you're buying right now. So as a minimum part of a project like this, you have to at least evaluate the competitors based on what they can deliver, even if you're not looking at buying it today. So we have these conversations with every prospective customer, and I'll tell you right now, almost all of them roll in unified messaging for the initial rollout. They look at that, they realize what that productivity will bring to them, they look at the flexibility of our product, and it's very low cost to roll that out, and those two bottom lines almost always end up in the initial implementation of our product when consolidation is happening. And then the speech-enabled personal assistant, what we try and do is tell people, just buy enough to try it out. Just buy some so your departments can kind of play with it, and then when the time comes for you to make a decision, you'll know what it does and how you want to roll it out. And those other functionalities, they tend to come later. And that's fine, but make sure the system you're looking at when you're doing the evaluations is going to be capable. And not just a slide that says, yes, we have these features. You know, most of our competition has the same slides as we do, but when you look at what it takes to do it, how many different servers, how many different applications, how many different administration clients, how many different user clients to maintain the different applications, it will become apparent that rolling out some of these features on other products probably is not going to be very easy to do. We've been doing consolidation and legacy system replacement for many, many years now. We figured this out very early on. The very first thing we did in our product was we got an ARIA interface, and the best one in the market, by the way, very, very accurate. And that allowed us to start talking to enterprise customers. You know, enterprise customers were the first people who rolled out the bigger voicemail systems. Therefore, their systems are going into support. And what we found is almost everybody out there that has an older Octel system, or even an older Meridian Mail, or even we're seeing call pilots now because of the Windows issues with them, they're all ready to have these discussions. So across the board, regardless of the healthcare, regardless of the whether it's healthcare, government, or in any category, we've been very successful. And while this is a great slide in terms of credibility, and I think that's why marketing has it, it's also a very interesting slide in terms of things like interoperability. First Energy over on the enterprise side was one of the systems that I talked about, the 68 locations, all these different types of phone systems. They needed a custom application built. We have a great set of custom tools. So that's one of those. UCLA, like Toronto, was a single site, but multiple phone systems, multiple locations, and they had kind of the same types and concerns that everybody else would have. If you look at some of the healthcare issues, you know, they had all the same issues plus some fairly serious HIPAA concerns, and the flexibility of our product made us very popular there. And then the government, of course, because of the different kinds of network architectures, security, and things like that, those have been very, very, very easy enterprises for us to deal with because we have that functionality. Keep in mind, this product's been under development since 1982, so when we sit down and compare ourselves to our competition, nobody else is close. You know, nobody else has a product on the market they can give you a reference for where it's been in 10 years and not broken, because none of those systems on the market are even anywhere close to 10 years old. So we believe we should be on your list of customers to evaluate if you're looking at a consolidation. If you go out and talk to our customers, and we certainly do afterwards, and ask, you know, what was it that put us in the running? Why did you pick AVST? These are the categories that they come back with. And almost all of them have something to do with our interoperability and flexibility of infrastructure piece. As these early slides said, enterprises are very complex things, and even though we're very concerned when we put things in to make sure our customers get taken care of, between security and architecture, the flexibility of the product is every bit important as the functionality of the product. So questions?
Okay, we do have several questions queued up. Just as a reminder, if you've got that question area minimized, use the orange arrow in the upper corner of your screen. And in that same area, you'll also find a place called Handouts where you can download the slides if you're interested. Neil, first question. How many users are supported by the 752 ports?
So there's no limit. We don't license users. Licensed user mailboxes are free. So the question is, how many users can 752 ports, you know, support? And that's got to be a function of what applications are you going to use. We say 40,000 because we're safe that if you deploy everything we have, you can get 40,000 users on 752 ports. No problem. If you just have basic voice messaging and simple automated attendant, that number is much higher. We have people with more than 40,000 users on our system. Anything more than 40,000, we would want to sit down and talk about what you're using. Now, I have to say, very few customers have 40,000 users in the United States that are looking to centralize. There's some, obviously, but what we usually find that question is from somebody that says, I have business here, I have business in EMEA, I have business in the Pacific Rim, and typically the way those get deployed, because of the data networks and latency issues, is with a core CX in each of those 3 locations that are functioning together, which we can do. So that means, you know, the 40,000 limit is really just for the single core, and again, haven't had too much problem with that.
Okay, next question. What are the redundancy options for smaller companies with only 1 location?
So the basic way we start this is we kind of talk about if you're a smaller location, you can certainly put CX in on a single physical server. A server, you know, with dual drives, RAID, hot swappable power supplies. You know, keep in mind voicemails, you know, they were engineered originally for that 99.999% availability, and we're still pretty close to that, even with the newer operating systems when it sits on the network. So even just by picking a good server, you're going to get quite a bit of availability. And keep in mind, you can set a CX up to do a nightly backup. So even if you had a failure, you know, you could replace the server and be back online in very short time. The next stage is you can do that same multiple component approach where you could put in 2 call servers and 2 system servers on a single site, and now you would have full redundancy. No single component could fail and take you out of business. If you're a VMware shop, you could put a single physical host on with a system server and call server on it, and then using the high availability and fault tolerance functionality, you could actually have an active copy of that host running in VMware that if that host failed, that second host would kick in automatically and you'd still be up and working. So we go from just simple hardware reliability right up to complete redundancy with either our options or the VMware options.
Okay, next question. Do you support Avaya and Cisco integration via TLS?
Yes, we do, although I have to say we've only had 1 customer so far implemented. While it's been on our list of things we do, I think getting it on the telephone system side has been problematic. So customers started down that road, said, yeah, can you do TLS? And we say, yes, we can. And then usually a few weeks later they say, yeah, we've decided to put that on hold for a while. We have put it in. It is supported. We've tested in our lab. We're ready to go on any SIP integration with TLS. While there might be tuning for the integration depending, we have what we need in terms of a core stack to do it.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. Next question here. What type of PSTN connections does your DM support?
So from the PSTN, we rarely connect directly to the PSTN. We're almost always going to be connected to the phone system, you know, behind the PBX, which is connected to the PSTN. So from that point of view, obviously, we don't care what the PBX is using. If you are going to connect this directly to the PSTN, if it's Centrex, then we can do Centrex line-side T1, Centrex analog ports, typical SMDI link, the basics. About the only reason you would use our product directly to the PSTN if it wasn't Centrex would be perhaps for an IVR application, a data access application. Because remember, connected directly to the generic PSTN, there's no transfer capabilities or none of the kind of integration functionality people usually want along with our application.
Okay, and another question. What about a central managed dial plan that is distributed to the multiple sites?
Dial plans are always an interesting challenge, and they're much more of a challenge for the telephony architecture people than they are for us. So we probably get every day the question, I'm getting ready to consolidate. One of my sites has 4-digit extensions. One has 7. You know, I have 2 sites with 4-digit extensions. They have conflicting mailboxes. Do we have to standardize our dial plan on the telephone systems before we can centralize your product, you know, use it in a centralized environment? The answer is no. We have 1 fixed mailbox lane. So if I had 2 companies, one with 4, or 2 divisions, one with 4-digit mailboxes, or 4-digit extensions, one with 7, I would have 7-digit mailbox numbers on the system, but those would still work perfectly fine with the 4-digit extensions coming in from that other site. We just have a way of translating those, so it's not an issue. If I had a third site with 4-digit ones and it had matching numbers, that's still no problem. We're going to have a unique mailbox number, and we know when that call comes in which integration it's coming from. Therefore, we know which actual user mailbox it's associated with. So we are happy to sit down and have the more complex, you know, dial plan discussion when we look at actually your architecture. but I haven't seen any kind of dial plan issues yet that restrict our ability to go into even the most complex and messy dial plans.
Okay, great. Thanks, Neil. It looks like that wraps up the questions, unless someone's still typing. Just want to let you know, certainly if you have follow-on questions or you think of something else, you can always email us at info@avst.com, and we'll make sure to route that to the most appropriate person to answer your question. And again, we did record this, so look for an email from us probably in the next day or so with a link to that in case you want to review some of the content here, including the Q&A. And also, we'll hope to see you on a future webinar. We do these usually 2 or 3 times a month, and if you're on the webinar, you'll certainly get those invites going forward if you're not already receiving them. So thanks, everyone, for taking the time to join us, and I'll go ahead and let Neil wrap us up.
Well, thank you, and I just really extend what Ann says. We really appreciate you taking the time here. Please, give us feedback. Are these the kind of things you want to see? Are they too long? Are they too short? Are there other topics you haven't seen us cover yet that you think would be very, very useful? We're happy to talk to anybody pretty much about anything concerning our product or the industry that we're in. And you can always send your request for information to info@avst.com, or you can go out to our website. And if you go out to our website, you'll find all kinds of other ways to chat and do things, and all the social media connections are out there as well.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.